Hey guys, what's up? It's Friday night and time for some ramblings and rantings and misdirected content because I'm good at that. Um, been talking to a lot of guys this week, and that's becoming more and more frequent, and I kind of like it. Getting some different perspectives, getting to meet new people, that's always something I enjoy. But a lot of questions come up about training and what makes a good trainer, what makes a good event, what makes a good class. Um, so I think there's a lot of things to consider there. Having done very limited training with the guys in the shop, um, engagement is something that is challenging. Obviously we're there to pass along knowledge, right? If you're giving the training or you're receiving it, you're there to gain knowledge. Um, some of the best trainers I have learned from, they're asking as many questions as they are answering. And I think that thirst for knowledge and that thirst for growth and that need to grow and evolve is what makes this such an awesome industry. Um, but engagement is something that is challenging. I don't think any of the guys on my crew are ballsy enough to actually fall asleep when I'm teaching a class because they're gonna wake up. And I'm gonna make sure it's on camera and probably very entertaining. When it happens, video will get posted. I promise. But keeping everybody engaged and not just awake, but keeping them involved in the conversation. We have a responsibility to do that, right? I mean, if we're training, whether we're in a formal class, or we're mentoring, or we're onboarding, which I've been doing the last 2 weeks and loving every minute of it. We have a responsibility to make it a conversation, right? I mean, I think the best instructors out there they're very composed, they're very organized, but it's a conversation. It's a two-way street. It's an exchange of ideas. And there are certain empirical facts that don't change. There are certain methods that simply don't change. You can't really, Paul Danner is someone who I reference a fair amount. His training methods are some of probably the most complete I've seen and some of the most wholesome. And I say that because of their simplicity. Um, a lot of people get hung up on, well, I came from Ford. I can't work on a Chevy. I can't work on a Honda. It's all the same. At its core, it's all the same. There are differences. I'm not going to say they're all identical because they certainly aren't. But, being able to break out simple testing methods that are effective regardless of whether it is a Honda Civic or a Ferrari F360. I mean, how powerful is that? How basic is that though? There's, and that's really what I think a lot of us get hung up on. There are some very complex things we play with, but at its core, it's not. Easy to say, sometimes really hard to execute. Not saying that sometimes you're not going to have to gut a car to find the tertiary backup for the secondary antenna system buried in the roof. Thank you, Maserati. And it's not going to take you 19 and a half hours to get there with the micro suede headliner to find out that some asshole in Italy didn't plug it in. They also forget to put oil in some of their cars from the factory, but hey, who's counting? But getting to the conclusion is half the battle. It's the bigger part of the battle. It's the harder part of the battle. But what makes a good class? Comprehension, being able to relate to it, I think is important. But everybody is going to respond differently to different trainers. Some of my favorite classes have been with people that are not well regarded personally in the industry. They're absolutely brilliant individuals, and I am not going to name names. You can ask all you want. But people that are absolutely brilliant in this industry that don't have interpersonal skills that make them friendly and fun to be around. Um, it's really, I mean, you've got to be selective when you're picking a class. You have to go with quality classes. A lot of the events that I've been to do a really good job of vetting the instructors and vetting the content. It's impossible to get every one of them right. I've had some classes at some very big name events that were terrible. Um, I have only ever walked out of one class because that, to me, is the biggest kick in the teeth you can give to an instructor is walking out of a class. Um, I did walk out of a class on break at when Helene was going on. When my wife sent me a video of a large object that looked remarkably like a house floating by ours. Yeah, I walked out for that. Other than that, I don't walk out of a class. I don't care what I'm having to do to stay into it. If it's a bad class, I'm still not going to walk out and do that to the instructor. I think that is honestly the ultimate disrespect to the instructor. Um, I did it once. I didn't like the way that felt. I'll never do it again. Now, I have learned what instructors I work well with and I learn well from, and I do tend to gravitate towards them. And I think that's only natural. It's only fair. We're paying to be there. We need to get something out of it. There has been some content that I didn't care who the instructor was. I wanted it. I will take every sprinter class I can get. And I think the two instructors I've had on my Mercedes stuff, I've been very fortunate because they were phenomenal. Um, Same thing with BMW. I have taken a lot of BMW classes, and pretty much all but one of them have come from the same instructor. And friendships aside, amazing instructor, amazing class. But his classes are classes that I take every chance I get. I've been doing a lot more management stuff, and it's amazing to me the difference between management training and technical training. Um, you can tell who went to finishing school and who didn't, and it probably isn't the guys with grease under their fingernails. Um, and I think that's another thing to consider is, what is the background of the guy giving the class? Obviously, some of the higher end vehicles have techs that are on a different level. Anybody who knows me will attest to the fact that I am proper probably isn't a term that's used to describe me real often. Appropriate probably isn't in there real often either. Memorable is definitely in there, I'm pretty sure. Uh, I've heard lightweight a couple times, and I mean, I've earned it. Can't deny it. But it's. I try not to be insulting or disrespectful. I would hope that those aren't terms that I get associated with. But walking into some of the management classes, I made an impression. I'm not necessarily sure it was a good one. I still talk to the instructors, and I haven't got told never to come back to my class, so I guess that's good. But I'm definitely one of those students in that setting that I want to engage. If I have a question, I'm going to ask it, no matter how stupid it may sound. If I don't know, there's somebody else doesn't know. If everybody else knows and I don't care. I'm still going to ask it. Being afraid to get up in front of a room of people and ask a question that may seem basic. If you don't get it, it's not basic. If you're in a class, you need to understand it. You need to ask questions. The instructors need to be able to answer those questions. If instructors aren't going to take questions, it's not the right class. It can't be that. There's got to be a conversation. It has to be a conversation. The guys I like are generally very abrupt, very direct, and very blunt. But those are also qualities that I very much appreciate in people. I'm very passionate about this. I want passionate instructors. I want guys that are going to get up there and be animated and, you know, tell you about the stuff that you can do that's really stupid. I want the guys that have made the mistakes of doing stuff that probably wasn't going to work, but they tried it anyway and found out, yep, right, didn't work. You know, one of my favorite classes ever was a class on hybrids, where the instructor actually pointed out the fact that he didn't have his big red rubber gloves on, and they were watching plasma arcs come off of a cable. If the instructor, he's in here, if he wants to post up and talk about that, he's welcome to. I'm not going to mention him, but he's like, you know, it dawned on me after the fact that should have killed me, could have killed me, but man, that looked cool. You know, that's the stuff you remember, right? I mean, that's the stuff that sticks with you, and you know, you've definitely got to look around, read reviews, get to know the people, look at their Facebooks, look at their profiles on stuff, look at their social media, see what kind of personality they are. You know, but look at the quality, look at how quick their classes sell out at events. You know, look at the subject matter. If it's something you're passionate about, give it a shot. You know, there's a lot of guys I haven't taken classes from that I want to, simply because I've heard they're good, or it's a subject I want to learn about. Don't be afraid to explore. Get out there, figure it out. You know, Google, YouTube, the other ones that I can't think of. TikTok. I don't have TikTok. Lots of guys have TikTok. There's some fun stuff on TikTok. I'm learning a lot about Sasquatches. Guys, have an awesome weekend. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.